Join me for a conversation with game designer Brandon Gutowski.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Matt and I am your host. This is the podcast where we learn how to become better game masters and role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. As always, I have an amazing interview coming right up, guys. But first, just really quickly, check out DiceGeeks.com if you need some help cutting down your GM prep time. Look, guys, we love playing this hobby. I love this hobby. But sometimes prepping for sessions just gets overwhelming with all the other stuff in life going on. I make resource books so you can cut down that prep time and have more fun with your friends at the table, on Zoom, on Roll20, however you are getting to play tabletop role-playing games, which is the best hobby in the world. So remember, DiceGeeks.com. All right, now, guys. Here's the interview. My guest today is game designer Brandon Gutowski. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. How were you first introduced to the hobby of tabletop RPGs?
I think it was in college. We were going to play 4th edition. And some people may cringe at that and be like, oh no, you started with 4th edition. Well, I didn't have any of the trappings of 3.5 or 2. So I enjoyed it. We had fun. But I think we ended up trying different systems at that time, and it was very much a casual thing at the time. But like, that's sort of my into the hobby itself. And when I realized that role-playing games are great and a lot of fun, but like my step into actual game development was a little different.
Okay, yeah, and
it's a little more interesting if you want to go that.
Sure. I'll follow up with that in just a second. So I just wanted to ask, since you mentioned 4th edition, of course, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. I have interviewed the lead designer of 4th edition on the podcast, Rob Hainso. Great discussion, and he talked about it quite a bit. I was just going to say, that was your first experience with the tabletop role-playing game, so I can absolutely understand since you didn't have any history with it. What did you enjoy about it when you first came to the hobby? Maybe just even in general, what did you enjoy about tabletop role-playing games?
I'm generally more on the gamist side. So the fact that it 4th edition was very friendly to that gamist side of this is how we do tactical combat, I can kind of rely on that as I get used to the fact that I also need to provide input, like more than just playing a board game, because I played a lot of board games at the time. I have to provide input into the story. I have to give something of myself so that we can make it even better. And I think that structure and the kind of codification of some of the spells and the game progression type, like all of that was pretty well gamified. That really helped me lean on that when I, wasn't very good at role playing. I'm still probably not great, but I'm better than before.
Yeah. And that is an interesting perspective, because I think there are, some people who come to the hobby and they play D&D and, usually it's the gateway kind of drug, if you will, into the hobby. And they don't know what to do because they're used to structure. So I can definitely see that about 4th edition, that it had a little bit more of that structure and kind of could ease people into the role playing a little bit. That's interesting.
Yeah, I always thought that to me, creativity is like, it is based on rules. To me, you can only be creative if there's a rule to be creative around. And I think that mastering those rules and mastering those things, no matter how complex or simple they are, is where you can really challenge your creativity and grow it. And to me, that's more interesting, being creative around different pieces. Some people are better with few rules and honestly just like a giant open field. But for me, I need more to interact with because that's more interesting to me.
Okay. Yeah. I tend to be the open field kind of guy.
Yeah, it's always interesting.
Yeah,
to me.
Yeah, absolutely. What were some of the other systems? You said you kind of explored some other systems. What were some of those?
We decided to try Fate at the time. That was, I think, our second one. I didn't like Fate. It was not for me. Okay. I felt like Fate was, like it was light enough that it could get out of the way of the story. Mm-hmm. But then to me, I felt like I didn't need it. Like I could play Fate without Fate. So then why do I need Fate? Was my conclusion, which is, I know, very gamist perspective.
Yeah.
We then did Savage Worlds.
Oh, it's Savage Worlds. Nice. I have not played Fate. I have read the book for Fate, and it's interesting that I had a similar reaction when I was reading the book. Even though, like I said, I tend to be an open field kind of guy. Reading Fate, I had a similar reaction to yours. I was just like, well, we could just sit around and talk. We could just make up a story, and and nothing against Fate. I mean, I think it's pretty cool and it's innovative in its ways, and it really kind of blew my mind because coming to it some years back, seeing that it was definitely a departure from what I was used to. So I really enjoyed reading it, but I have yet to play it. Now, Savage Worlds, I have played a couple times at least. What did you think of Savage Worlds?
For the longest time, Savage Worlds was my favorite system.
Okay.
Like that, everything just kind of clicked. Edges and hindrances allowed me to be like, this is how I'm going to role play. Mm-hmm. And then the exploding dice is just fun. Like, I just like that mechanic. Like, maybe it's not as complex or as in depth as other. I really enjoy rolling a second die because, I got another 6. Let's roll some more. It was just fun. I think pieces like that, the overall goal of like pulp action, it just fit and hit right.
I found Savage Worlds to be a ton of fun as well. And there is something about that exploding die because I did play quite a bit of Legend of the Five Rings kind of back in the day, and they had an exploding die. So if you rolled a 10 and it exploded on the 10-sided die, and that was just so cool. And then when I tried out Savage Worlds to find out they had it as well, it was just awesome. It was just...
I didn't even...
Yep.
I didn't even know that Legend of the Five Rings had an exploding die.
Yeah, I think it was I'm going to get the edition wrong. I just played that one with my group, and another friend ran it. I think I want to say it was 3rd edition. Was it 3rd edition Legend of the Five Rings? That had the exploding 10-sided die, which was so much fun. It was just so much fun.
They changed those mechanics like each. I thought that'd be like a core mechanic.
I think they took it away. Oh. I'm trying to remember because I've only played that one edition, but my friends who were into L5R a little bit more talked about how they did not like some of the other editions. So I think they may have removed it later on. Yeah. Which doesn't make any sense, I don't think.
Every time I hear about this stuff, it's like, oh man, I need to read more systems.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's so much stuff out there nowadays.
So much. Yeah.
And so much of it is just fascinating and taking games in different directions, just like we already mentioned. I mean, D&D to Fate and to Savage Worlds to even L5R is just a wide variety of systems there. And that's just... I mean, that's not even, scratching the surface of how many different systems are out there, and people are pushing the envelopes of the hobby and of rules just like crazy. I mean, it's just some amazing things. I don't know. It did seem like there was a pretty big departure in some of the later editions, and I don't know exactly, what was going on there, but I mean, even today, right? We were talking, it just barely scratches the surface with the number of systems there are. But you said then you started getting into game development, and of course, you're a game designer. So,
yep.
how did that kind of start? Because I think obviously you were kind of drawn to the rules side, so you had to start making your own, I would assume.
Yeah. So ultimately, my first step into game development was actually through video games.
Oh, okay.
Me and 2 or 3 other people made a puzzle game. It's up on Steam. It's not very good. I haven't gotten enough money from it for Steam to cash out and pay me. So that explains it.
Well,
how well it was received.
Hopefully it isn't like a $5 threshold or something.
It's $100 threshold.
Oh no. Okay.
Yep. But it was fun. It was a good experience. And I learned from that. I really wanted to do just more game design rather than programming, because I did a lot of programming on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to do a little bit of board game stuff. And then I played. So I didn't really intend to ever start in role-playing game development.
Mm-hmm.
It just sort of happened.
Yeah.
I played a game called Gloomhaven.
Okay.
Which, is a rather popular RPG masquerading as a board game.
Yes.
And I really liked the perk system, the perk system and the attack modifier deck and how that interacted. That was just really cool to me.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy character advancement. It's fun. So I then was like, wait, I can do this in RPGs with a deck of cards. Like, this just kind of solves it. The jokers will be the 2 cards that reset the deck, and then you don't have this like solved state. Great. Let's mess with that. So then during work lunch breaks, I was messing around with cards, checking probabilities of like, how does this feel when I draw these cards? Should I draw 2 here? And that is where I got into RPG development. It was purely because of I want to put a deck of cards. I want to play RPGs with a deck of cards rather than dice.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. What was it about the deck of cards that made you prefer that over dice?
I like character advancement, and doing card upgrades to slowly swap out cards so they get better is microdosing character advancement.
Okay.
So I just get to do it more often.
Okay. So yeah, as you draw a card, you might get some different gear or different things, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, except like you can do it that way. But the way I made this one work was the skills. Okay, the skills have suits that matter for them. So the cards in your deck, you start with 22, 2 jokers, and then 20 number cards. And you can upgrade the cards, but you can swap out cards of like 1 suit for another. So I'm going to take my 5 of clubs and swap it out for a 6 of diamonds, because I can upgrade it by 1 number when I do it. So now my deck has more diamonds, which means I do better for things like athletics. I do better for things like magic. I do better things like investigation.
Okay.
Because that's all power related. So my character deck does just better on these. My character does better in these things. So now I've kind of I've shifted what my character looks like just by the deck. And it's like, so whenever I roll my die in a way, I'm better at certain things represented through that. And to further take that, I then made magic and maneuvers are the kind of maneuvers are the combat option. Magic is a little more freeform, but the suits that come up determine what types of magic you can use, and like the numbers on the cards determine how much power and energy, how much energy and influence you have to actually like shape your spell. And then maneuvers require like certain suits to be able to be activated. So this card, you can put like a 6 of diamonds in, and then that means I have 1 more chance to use this maneuver that trips the enemy when I attack, rather than one that just pushes them back a little bit. Right? Like that interaction, that depth is what I was looking for. And that's something I can do with cards, but I can't really do that with dice. Okay.
No, I see where you're going now with kind of the upgrades and that and the different suits. That's very interesting. And of course, yes, with dice, that would be very difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah. And
Uh-huh.
Dice have their own
Yeah.
own benefits.
Yeah.
This is just what I was looking for.
Yeah, sure thing. Sure thing. So that's interesting. Now, you have been working on kind of your own system that involves all of these things. Why don't you tell us what it's called and how you've been progressing that before we dive into kind of the system a little, or the setting a little bit?
Yeah. So I started with just what I call C22. In a way, it's like calling it an RPG engine. Right? I think I'd want to break it down to that level because it's not interesting to people that are not like super mechanically inclined. And even then, like, it's really, you care about what stories you can tell, what characters you can play, what worlds you can live in.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that after making that system. Took about a year and a half or so to finally decide exactly what all I want all the pieces to look like. And then I went, okay, I'm going to make some example things that people can play. So I made like a pirate one, a pirate raid, very tactical combat. I made stealing some blueprints from a space station. I made like a cursed town type thing, all working with unique deck mechanics. And then that was when I learned that people care about setting. So I took the space station one and built that out into an entire setting. And that's where I've got Freelancer's Guide to a Profit-Focused Living.
Okay. And we'll dive into the setting a little bit more. You just mentioned though, like very technical combat. Does this new setting focus on combat, or is it something else?
The new setting I found with sci-fi guns are dangerous, right? So
yes.
Combat lasts 2 rounds pretty much at most. The first round is kind of tactical in a way that like you talk and plan them with your team on how it's going to happen. But I honestly don't focus too much on combat in the system. I actually really like the plan out, like you'll plan out a phase of your heist. You've got this whole heist planned with different stages in it. And then different stages. So the first stage, you'll have a planning phase and an execution phase. You plan it out for a little bit. You talk about what way you're going to do. Do you play the important scene? And it's usually not combat. It's usually just like, I'm going to sneak around here, or I'm going to distract this guy while this happens. And that is, that's sort of the way that it goes. So I've done combat. It's okay. It definitely works better for fantasy just because the combat lasts a little bit longer, 3 to 4 turns rather than 1 to 2.
Yeah. A disintegration ray or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, people start with 8 health and guns start at 12 damage. So, combat's a little quick.
Yeah, it can kill you quick. Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we dive into the setting then of Freelancer's Guide? You said you took an idea from a space station and then you started mentioning heists. So I guess we're going to be talking about sci-fi heists.
I started with just something I call Milcom Shipyard Infiltration. You are stealing blueprints from the most secure shipyard in the galaxy. So I wanted to determine what is the best way to approach running a heist so that I can make people feel like Ocean's 11. Because that's what I envision in a heist, is like pretend like I'm that super master planner, the mastermind behind the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I broke it into the mission into different phases, right? Because I don't want to go and play the whole thing out. That would take too long. It can drag. You'll have boring parts. I go, okay, this is the important part. You're landing in the docks, or we're gonna play you have to get off of the shipyard or the station onto the shipyard because they're 2 interconnected things, but there's a giant nebula between them. So you have to transition from one to the other without through the only safe way to go through, because that nebula eats ships. And then on the shipyard, you've got to go and break into the vault and then take the stuff that you need, and then you have to escape. I'm like, okay, those are the 3 phases. Let's run those, and then we'll plan out what people want to do and how they want to approach that phase, pretending that they have prior knowledge. Like I give them prior knowledge in the planning phase. It's like, you know that this is here, or you know that these security features are in place. How did you want to deal with them? So that's how I approached the whole setup. And I found that since I liked that style, I went and tried to make the whole setting to it. I had to make all of the rules for the core system into what had fit for sci-fi, and then figure out what was actually essential and what new skills needed to be added. That was the change.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope that answers it. I realized I probably drifted off to some other direction.
No, that was good, and we'll dive in a little bit more. So obviously, like Ocean's 11 kind of in space, which is awesome. I mean, usually I find if you just add in space to anything, it becomes way cooler. So that sounds good to me. And before we kind of dive into a little bit more of the gameplay or some of the skills you were mentioning, in the setting, what other, besides say Ocean's 11 or a Heist, what other kind of inspirations did you draw from while you were creating this sci-fi setting?
So the way that I end up kind of selling the thing is you plan your missions like your crew of Ocean's 11, and you execute the phases like you're in Firefly or Cowboy Bebop.
Okay.
And that's usually how the game ends up playing. It's a lot more crazy. So I ended up pulling a little bit of inspiration from Firefly, from Mass Effect for just ideas for equipment, because I really like Mass Effect equipment. And for me, I like cyberpunk aspects. So I honestly ended up grabbing pieces from like Deus Ex, and just cyberpunk visuals that I see often. And I'd say a lot more recently, within the last 6 months, I really kind of harnessed the anti-work rhetoric that the internet seems to be all about at the time. We're being oppressed by a bunch of megacorps that took over the galaxy. And that is sort of where I ended up taking the whole setting. And that's why you're freelancers.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And yes, I've heard of that movement as well. So that's interesting combination. Of course, it works very well with kind of corporate overlord type kind of games. It goes right into that as well. So that's interesting. So that's a pretty good sell when you say Ocean's 11, Firefly, Cowboy Bebop, and you say some of those names. That's a pretty good sell.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now, when you're kind of mixing all of these elements up, I'm just kind of wondering, like, how deep are you going with the setting? Are you going to create like a setting book and release a setting book? Or are you going to keep the setting kind of vague so people can kind of tool with it themselves?
It's a good question, because I know what I've got a free version up actually as of right now as we're recording this. Mm-hmm. And it ends up being about 106 pages. But I try and keep, I'm trying to make a whole setting, right? So the whole thing has how you interact and move from place to place, what your ships look like, what the species are that exist that you can play, the different megacorps. But when I go and describe some of them, I actually keep descriptions pretty short, just enough to inspire creativity for you to take it the rest. That's what I try to do. If I could pull up an excerpt from that book, I could show you all that goes into a description, because I honestly don't think it's very much. I definitely lean more on the vague side, and I've been debating myself, do I even want to put pictures of the species in the book. Because I've gotten different visuals by what I wrote on what people think that they look like. And I'm like, I'm fine with that. They all sound great. I don't want to define what your character's supposed to look like.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've kind of always found that to be kind of an aspect of the hobby as well. It's just you have your playable species or something, and then you have a picture next to it. Sometimes it helps incredibly, and then other times you think, okay, well, I'm kind of stuck here with this one thing, instead of just being able to say, why can't they have this look to them or something like that. So yeah, that's interesting.
Would you mind if I read off kind of
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I said, the Nixians recently gained FTL travel only within the last 50 years. They developed their own FTL method, and one day they were just here. They adopted well to interacting with other cultures, joining companies and grabbing power individually. Their stubbornness and focus on quality allowed them to thrive in the business world. The Nixians are the largest of the races, standing on average just under 2 meters tall. They have hard segmented plates along their back and skin, and skin is usually tough except for their lower arms and hands, which is soft and allows them to do more delicate work as well. And then I actually included some quotes, I guess. Yeah. But I don't know. If you want, I'll continue reading that last little bit. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Nixian culture is deeply spiritual, traditional, and utilitarian. I find that human author Lucas Park describes this wonderfully from this excerpt from his book. The time I spent on Nyx was the hardest of my life. The land itself constantly tested me, shaping me to its will. The storms were the worst. I never knew what would strike me next. I felt I lost a lot of myself those years, but what I have left, I know is the true me. All that is essential still remains, and in that essentiality, I find my true beauty.
Yeah.
That is what I put for Nixians, and I don't really want to expand on that. I honestly think that that's enough, and I don't even know if I want to draw a picture, because I've gotten insect people, I've gotten armadillo folks. I think they're both valid takes on that. I think there are other valid takes as well that haven't been explored.
Mm-hmm. No, I really like the use of the quote from kind of an in-setting, reference material. I love that stuff. I've used that in a number of the books that I have created. And I actually talked to, in a previous interview, I interviewed Robert Hewitt-Wolf, who is a TV producer and writer, and the old sci-fi show Andromeda. Every episode began with a quote from some source in the universe, and I asked him about that, and we had a conversation about how that just adds depth to your setting. It's like a cheap way to add a lot of depth to your setting, because you've just created an author, a book, and their perspective on it, and you've just added just like a layer of history into your universe by creating a 20 word, writing 25 words or whatever it is.
There's this another movie that did that really well. John Wick I actually thought did a really good job at that, world building outside of just I can't think of the term for it right now, but you build the world around him, and you're like, there's a lot of depth to this world. As you see him kind of get back into it. And I think that one does a really good job of just making it seem like there's more depth than what they provide immediately say.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a technical term for it, and I can't remember what it's called. It's a something reference, they call it, and it's there is a technical term to it. It's like a fictional reference inside a fictional world. It's really a kind of an interesting way to go. But I love doing that because you just like I said, I mean, you just make your world instantly bigger with kind of an economy of words, instead of, going into, some more lengthy description about the creatures or about the world or the ship or something like that, have somebody write about it in a book or a holo vid or whatever you want to credit it as, a sacred text that's like 1,000 years old or something like that. All of that stuff, it just adds right to the world like instantly. Yeah, no, that's really neat. Now, how many playable species do you have in the game?
Right now there are 4.
Yeah.
Humans, Klebians, Nixians, and Yents. And there are 2 versions of Klebians because their planet got hit by a nebula entity, which is also something I'd only describe kind of briefly and just let you imagine what this weird space magic providing being is.
Yeah.
I'm debating putting androids in because I think that's something that'd be really cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And for the Kickstarter, as we're going to talk about it now, but the Kickstarter will have already happened by the time people hear this. But I was thinking of adding something to make someone else, like make another race, if somebody's really interested in that and wants to provide some additional money for that. I'm like, I could definitely see that being added. But I felt 4 was good.
Mm-hmm.
They all have a little different pieces to them, and I was pretty happy with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess one of the things is always with like new alien species and stuff is giving them enough uniqueness, right, to warrant something other than a human or something like that. And you read about the Nixians there and talked about that. Did you kind of struggle with that a little bit, or did you, how did you kind of think about making them different than humans?
So honestly, the hardest one for me was figuring out how to describe humans from the perspective of other races, because each one of these was supposed to be only written by a different race.
Oh.
And like theirs is mostly focused on here. I'm actually just gonna read the quote because apparently you like that and that sounds fine. So let's see. So I wrote, so in a way, their war is economic and money is their weapon. As the Yent diplomat Su Ku said, once you have a knife to a human's throat, then you know negotiations can start. For it is at this point, they know that if they use their knife, then so too will you. That was kind of what I decided to settle on for humans.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool. And it is one of those challenges where you say, how do you step out of being a human to describe humans, right?
Right.
Yeah, that is a big challenge for any author. So
that was the hardest one, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. No, I get that. Yes, because we can always look at somebody outside of us, but how do you describe a human to somebody who's just meeting one for the first time?
They're bags of meat. They're all meat. They're made of meat.
Or
I don't know if you know that reference.
Yeah, I do not. Oh,
there's a video that I think you could just search. They're made of meat.
Oh, that sounds a little familiar, actually, now that you're saying it. But I'm not getting that one. My first one, because I guess I'm a bit older than you. My first one is Star Trek: The Next Generation, mostly ugly bags of mostly water. That's yeah. So that's the one that I remember. Okay, I'll have to check that one out. I'll have to check out They're Made of Meat. Okay.
It's based off a short story, but that's just a skit for it. That's I think about 6 minutes long.
Oh, okay.
It's great.
Yeah. I'll have to check that out later after the show. But that is interesting. Yeah. How do you describe human beings from a alien's perspective? Since we're not, we are human beings. No, that is really interesting. So now, I was just thinking here, then, I'm just kind of wondering about gameplay. You said you kind of make your group and you plan your heist and you kind of think of ways to get around some things, but and you were talking about character development, I guess. Are there ways to add like I don't know, hacking gear or make ships better and stuff like that? Do you have things like that?
Yeah, the main progression in the game is through item purchasing. Like,
Okay.
I've got five different mega corporations that essentially control the galaxy and have their own script. I've got the base gear you can buy anywhere, and then I have a black market. And you will buy these things. You'll buy new ships. You'll put new pieces on ships. You'll buy new bases. You'll put pieces on bases.
Okay.
Or different rooms, I guess is the better way to put it. Different rooms and bases.
Okay.
That is the main thing. And there's like a lot of the gear is one-time use mission gear. So it's like, I'm going to use this grenade that reverses gravity for a round. But it's a grenade, and it costs, like maybe not a tenth of this mission price, but like 5% of this mission price. So like you really cut into your profits when you start using gear.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
that's sort of the goal behind it.
Okay. So they're given like a budget. Is that the idea? The players are given a budget? Oh, okay. And you spend.
You'll get you get a reward at the end of the mission. You've done something. The person who hired you to do it pays you.
Sure.
And you've bought different gear beforehand during downtime, because in between each mission you've got downtime. You can do one action for one major action, and then minor actions are like talking to people you already know, buying new gear. I think I had one other in there, but those are the two major ones. Sorry, two most common minor actions.
Okay.
Just to not mix up words.
Yeah, game terms. Yeah.
So yeah, you can always buy new gear. And that's just like, let's say you earned 30,000 script from that last mission. Your take, because there's 3 of you, is 10, and then you go and buy another one of these grenades that reverses gravity for 1,000. You're like, oh, okay. I've like, if I have to use this, it's fun. It's certainly fun, but like now I'm out 1,000. I'm tossing $1,000 at the enemy.
Yeah. Okay. So
throwing money at it to make the problem go away.
Well, that's an interesting.
Go to the ceiling, but
yes, that's an interesting way to describe warfare or combat. It's just because each round could be like $2, so you just throw enough of them at it until the problem goes away. That's interesting.
I mean, I don't know. I'm human. I described humans as their war is economic.
Yeah.
You just throw money at the problems to make them go away.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's funny. That is funny. No, I get the concept now. I'm sorry. I had said at first, the way you had kind of described it, I thought maybe they got a budget or something to kind of I don't know what I was thinking of. Maybe like the employer gives them like half the money up front and says, okay, you can buy some stuff, but this is like half of your thing. That's kind of where I was thinking, but I didn't mean to kind of get it off track, but I think it is, it makes perfect sense the way you described it there. And by the way, a reverse gravity grenade is awesome. That is,
yeah, I was happy with that one.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like really cool. And so that's interesting. And then now you did say, you ran a Kickstarter and things like that. What's kind of your goal really with the, Freelancer's Guide? Like you are, the result of the Kickstarter, you're going to put it in a book and you're going to release it, or how is that going to, what's kind of your thought behind the game there?
Ultimately I want more people to play this, but it'd be really nice to have a book. And honestly, some decks of cards that are unique to this game. Yeah. So that's my goal, is to get a couple things printed for people who want these, like this game and want to hold an actual book. I also want to put more art in this book, but I really just shouldn't keep funding art myself. I have other bills to actually pay.
Yeah, art is expensive. Yes.
Yeah, like when I want to actually get something really, really well done, and up to like the quality that I'm aiming for, it starts costing a lot more money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's honestly where most of it's going to go is just art, making more ship designs, because I paid for 2, but I have 10 in the book. So I want more ships. I want more ships in the book that you can just like everyone gets access to, and now you can play your games on these ships. Like you'll have a bunch of battle maps for ships if you want to go and just do pirate raids on other people's spaceships, so space pirates instead, or bases as well, just to represent, because it's really fun. Like I'm going to go and actually reference Critical Role here because I have seen a little bit of Critical Role, and in the last season they got a player house. Like this was like 3 years ago or something. I don't know. I've never caught up with their seasons, but they got a player house, and it was a lot of fun when people got the player house. They all claimed rooms and like labeled and named things. Like that's fun. I want that. I want to get a ship. I want to name the ship, and I want to say, this is my room. This is where our tractor beam is going to go. This is where our drone storage room is going to go. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I agree. That's when you kind of get your base or your ship. That is like some of the coolest thing is like picking your room on the ship, or picking where places go, or naming your ship and stuff like that. That is a lot of fun. Now, I guess I should also ask a little bit more about characters and maybe how gameplay interacts with people. So if you're building from a deck, is there a game master or is there not a game master? How does that kind of work?
So each character is represented by their own deck of 22 number cards. So whenever they need to make a check, they're going to draw from their deck, and then they'll just keep drawing until they get one of the 2 jokers. Jokers are what's going to reset the deck. The game master, or I call them the dealer, has 1 or 2 decks. One I have is like an event deck. It's got a little higher number cards in it, and you use it to like set limits on where, like if I have a bunch of complex tasks, I'll set out a couple cards to represent each of the tasks, and then it'll be like, okay, you need a 6 here, a 9 here, a 7 here, and a 5 here. And then that's how you can use it to sort of inspire that complex task on what all the pieces are. Or the other one is just to interact and use for the, what's it called? The enemies and such. Sorry. Mind blank there. But I think they don't use the deck very much. The dealer doesn't really change the deck or use. It's mostly players drawing cards from their own individual decks.
From their own decks. No, that's interesting. Yep. Yeah, that's interesting. And so players get to name their characters and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, you've got a character sheet with all your skills on it, and then a deck which represents your character. So as you'll like level up, you'll do either card upgrades, which happen as you play and a little bit every level, and then skill upgrades, which happen while you actually level up, and you'll get different skills, which means that'll help your deck. Like for example, let's say you get upgraded in athletics and you take sprint and lift or something. You get to put 2 points into the skill tree. Skill tree goes and adds 2 different suits to it. So you'll add like diamonds. I think it's diamonds and hearts. So whenever a diamond or a heart shows up, you'll get an additional +1 when using athletics. And that's how I make suits matter. That's the really nitty gritty mechanics to it, but that's how I make it meaningful what cards are in your deck.
No, that's really interesting. Okay. Well, Brandon, where can people find your game?
When people hear this, hopefully the Kickstarter, if I'm lucky, the Kickstarter will have been successful. And at that point, you'll probably need to wait until it's released up, probably going to be on drive-thru. If I'm unlucky, then you can wait until I try and do another Kickstarter. And the best way to follow me is at C22 System on Twitter. Or, and if you go through there, you can get on my Discord, which is honestly the best place to just see anything about this. The website, C22system.com. is the best place to just see how this works in terms of just general rules. There's a whole SRD of just how the whole engine works. Freelancer's Guide has some examples that are up on that site as well.
Okay, well, that sounds fantastic. And I will be sure to put links in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. So anybody who is listening right now could head over there and check out those links and learn more about Freelancer's Guide or just the C22 system. Well, Brandon, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. I had a ton of fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for this. This was a good talk. I learned a few things too.
All right, there you have it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed my interview with Brandon today. As always, you can find links to Brandon's work in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. I encourage you to head over there right now and check those out. You will learn a ton about Brandon's games and his work, and you will not regret it. dicegeeks.com. Show notes. There you go. All right, now if you want some free stuff, you can also head over to dicegeeks.com, but you're going to put in a slash followed by the word free. You'll get 20 free dungeon maps, a custom 5e character background, and a whole bunch of other little tidbit PDFs that will help you run better games. Also, you will never miss an episode of this show, and each and every Friday, you will get an email update from me letting you know what is going on in this world of Dice Geeks. All right, guys, I thank you so much for tuning in again. I can't wait to bring you another episode this coming Wednesday. So until then, keep gaming!